Hi, welcome back to the podcast School of Love, where we want to help you create parent-child relationships where you can talk about anything, especially sex. And today our guest is here to help us specifically in having these conversations about sex. And I'm so happy I got in contact with her. I actually just found her the inside of a book. She wrote a written recommendation, and I looked her up and found, wow, she has so much experience and knowledge. This lovely Sri Lankan evangelical Christian sexologist. Who ever put these words together in a sentence before? And I really hope from this episode and through this conversation, you can be able to let go some of your fears in the conversation about sex. She gives a lot of tips and tricks and a lot of ways to take on any kind of teaching opportunity for our kids to learn more. And I also hope you can realize the importance of our role as parents in being our kids' main sex educator. Sex education, it sounds so official, but it doesn't really have to be. It's really just having these natural conversations, being there to support my kid, and letting them know God's original plan, God's design for sex, and how that is actually meant to be such a wonderful, beautiful thing and experience. And so, yeah, I hope you have fun listening to this episode. So, welcome back, everyone. And I would like to introduce to you our guest for today. Her name is Patricia Weerakoon from Sri Lanka, and she's a medical doctor, academic, sexologist, writer, and an evangelical Christian. She retired in 2012 from her career at the University of Sydney as the director of an internationally renowned graduate program in sexual health. Since then, she has pursued her passion for writing and public speaking, which bring together her enthusiasm for healthy sexuality and her love for the glory of God. Her nonfiction books are gold standard guides for good sexuality for all ages and include Talking Sex by the Book and The Gender Revolution, and many more, actually. And she has written 4 novels. So, yeah, before I forget, you can find out more about her at her website, patriciaweerakoon.com. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure, and greetings from Sydney, Australia.
Right. Yeah, we're at opposite ends of the world, and I'm really glad we can make this happen. And yeah, today we want to, bust some myths around talking to our kids about sexuality. And yeah, I saw that you wrote a book specifically about this, and you're getting this message out on the internet. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful to start this conversation with you. Yeah, us parents, I think we have a lot of fears because this is kind of new. I don't think there are cultures that exist that just have naturally passed on knowledge about sex to their kids. I would be curious to know if there are cultures that do that. But yeah, but slowly I feel like a new culture is unraveling where we realize it's okay to talk about this, and it's even good. Yeah.
Okay, so where do you want to go, Amelia? With so much we can talk about. Where do you want to start?
So we have a lot of fears around talking to our kids about sex, and maybe we can start with a really general one, like just my child is too innocent, for example. Like I don't want, my child doesn't need to know about sexuality, and so why should I talk about
There's
it?
so much around that, isn't there, Amelia? Well, when I talk to people, I sort of kind of like to talk about what are the roadblocks. What are our roadblocks? Because like you said, it is so essential that parents are the ones who take the initiative. Because, let me say this up front, yes, I don't think any culture where intimate discussions on things like sex come naturally. But more and more, raising children in this cyber world, it is absolutely essential that parents take the initiative. So when I talk, I call it like roadblocks. And like you were saying, some of the roadblocks are just like, my gosh, my kid's too innocent, my kid's too young. But basically, I say there's 3 main areas. One is just basically parents' own attitudes and values. Like you're so embarrassed. So it's your personal attitude. Secondly, it's parents' fears of like, I don't know what to say. They don't have the knowledge. And thirdly, I don't know how to talk about it. And as I said, it basically comes right back to, I'm just too embarrassed. Because, Amelia, think back when I don't know how it is in Germany or, in the European countries, but I come from Sri Lanka, and obviously living in Australia, I have a lot of experience talking to people here. I'm 77, but when I talk to younger people, even in their 30s, their parents didn't talk to them about it. So when husband and wife have grown up with parents never talking about sex, and they've got their information from, maybe from school, but usually from friends, because this is pre-internet. Now, it's hard for them as parents to feel comfortable talking. So it's this embarrassment. But like I said to you, unless we talk, then someone else is going to. And that's the frightening thing. Because they're going to get it from friends, and friends get it from other friends, but even worse, they're going to get it from the internet, and sadly even pornography. That's the danger. So we can sort of keep on this area of talking about it, but I mean, what kind of specific things do you think your audience would be interested in? Like, what questions do you think they would be interested in?
Yeah, there's also a general fear of, so if I say things to do with sexuality, then what if I'm, kind of lighting a fire, like what if I'm putting in this curiosity that just doesn't need to be there,
Yeah. Now, that's an excellent question, because that's one of these sort of discomfort, embarrassment, fear that parents have. And firstly, children are naturally curious. We need to accept that. Even little kids, you're a mother. You think of your kids when they were really, really young. I'm talking 2 and 3 years. I mean, if they see a picture of someone nude, it's kind of giggly. I say kids get giggly and wriggly. They kind of know that this is something to be curious about. You talk about kids playing doctor, show me yours and I'll show you mine. Why? Because they're naturally curious. So the important thing is, where are they going to sort of find the answers for this natural curiosity? And so you're, as a parent, being the one to give them the right information is research-based. And we were talking about this earlier off camera, that the research, and we're talking just a lot of research out there, clearly saying that if a young person, a child, hears from the parent or another responsible adult about sexuality early in life, and we're talking like pre-teens at least, they are less likely to take risks with sexual behavior. They are likely to put off first sexual intercourse. And they are likely to come to this person for information. And that's another really important thing, because parents, when talking early about sexuality and other issues, it's not only sex. It's about parents establishing that comfort of communication. Then they become the person to whom the kid will always turn, whether they are 5 or 6 or teens or even as a young adult. If there's something they want to talk about, sex or something else, they'll turn to the parent. And that needs to be established really early in life.
Yeah, I love how you explain that, because it just gives me so much reassurance in this parenting journey, because there is just a lot of lack of experience in this area. And we just want to do our best with our kids. And because we didn't learn that way, like either we didn't get a conversation or it was much later, like more early teens where our parents finally spoke to us. So it feels like a little bit dangerous or risky to talk to a young child, about sexuality. But I really love just, yeah, this reassurance because I've been thinking the same. Like, if we want to become that key person in our kids' lives, then we should try to be the first person to talk about it. Because I know when I was a kid, I didn't hear it first from my parents, but I still heard about it pretty early when I was 6 years old. And it made me think, oh, that's like a bad thing. And so I shouldn't talk to my parents about it. And so there was never like a buildup of being able to go to my parents and ask them questions and anything to do with that. So yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
good to hear that.
Yeah, and Amelia, what you just said is extremely important. And that is that unfortunately, if you don't give a good story about sexuality to your children, now whatever background you may come from, like as you said earlier, I'm a Christian, so I would say to Christians, give them a good Bible based story. And the Bible gives a great story from Genesis, the first book of the Bible, like naked and no shame, and Adam and Eve having great sex in the Garden of Eden, right through to the last book in Revelation. There is this beautiful story, a healthy, positive story. So, whatever your background, whatever your cultural background, give them a good story about sex and sexuality and their body, how beautiful it is to be male and female, and how the genitals are made, they're made lovely and they feel good. Look, I tell people, if your genitals didn't feel good, nobody would have sex and nobody would have babies. So we are made, and Christians we say God made, but whatever it is you believe in, your genitals are made to feel good. So we need to tell our children, but they are not toys. So you don't play with them, which is where like masturbation comes in. Even in younger children, we can say, look, your genitals feel good because that's the way they are made. They are made for a good purpose, to bring together man and woman and make babies. So they're not a toy for you to play around with just on your own. And so once we've given them a good story, then they don't feel, and I'm coming back to the comment you made, of shame and guilt when it comes to sex. So that if they see pornography, or sadly, even if somebody was to touch them in some abusive manner, they can now come back to the parents and be free to say, Mom, Dad, I've been, someone's shown me pornography, or I came across it, or something happened, someone touched me on my penis or my vagina and vulva, and again note the right words for the body parts. So, once you've taught them that it's okay, that these are the words we use. Now, I don't know what in German, whether you have cutesy words, we call it cutesy words for the genitals. No, teach your children the right word in whatever language, so that they have a language to talk to you without feeling shame and guilt. That's really important. Open the communication channels, no shame, no guilt. This is why your body is good. This is why sex is such a good and beautiful thing. You were made, teach your children, you were made in an act of love. That's a beautiful thing for a child to know, that mommy, daddy came together, had sex, put their bodies together and made you. And that's a good thing. Then they don't feel that shame and guilt if something were to happen, that they can come and talk to you.
Yeah, I love the emphasis of what you said when, if children, about their genitals, that the emphasis that it's good, but it's not a toy, because there is a lot of fear around. I think kids do this a lot. That's why this question comes up a lot, which is like touching the genitals and exploring that part of their body. And I think a lot of us don't know how to react or just have instinctive fear. But yeah, I just love how you explain that it's telling them, yeah, this is a good part of your body, but it's not a toy. It's a special part that, and also, yeah, saying like, yeah, this has the potential in the future to do amazing things, create even babies. But yeah, we don't play with them. Yeah.
Yeah. And Amelia, I love how you drop things that I want to, yes, let's talk about it. I mean, you said to react. And that's, we talk about, you can, when it comes to sex education, you can be proactive, which means you take the initiative. And which is what we've been talking about, like don't wait for internet or pornography or someone else, even teachers. Sadly, we can't even nowadays even trust that schools are going to give the right information. We have to be the ones who do it first. So that's proactive, meaning you be the one who takes that first step. But parents must also be, as we've already talked about, open to be reactive if the child comes and asks a question. Not to go, what are you talking about? And get all sort of, defensive. But rather to say, well, thank you for coming to me with that question. You see that importance of like recognizing the fact that your child has actually come to you with that question without going to Google or to a friend, and Googling, something, and getting some misinformation or lies or some AI generated, wrong information. But rather they come to you and ask. So say thank you. And then sometimes you may not know what they're talking about. I mean, look, maybe they're asking about some, I don't know, transgender term or something that you're going, I have no idea what this is. So don't panic. Thank the child. And if you don't know, sort of say, look, I don't know, darling, but let's go and read something in something we trust, or let me find out and then get back to you. So it's okay to say, I don't know, or even I'm not very comfortable, let's go find some information. It's okay to say that. You don't have to be the expert on everything. You can just be a parent and don't be afraid to say, this is something I don't know, I'll find out, and let's talk about it tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah, kind of going deeper into that, like, what could you say to parents who are just generally really embarrassed to talk about this topic? Embarrassed or, yeah,
For many
uncomfortable.
reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's important that you recognize the fact that it's okay to be embarrassed. And if I'm saying parents now, if there's husband and wife, and I'm aware that in every country, everywhere in the world, there are single parents. But if you are like mom and dad and the children, bringing up the children together, it's really important that mom and dad be on the same page. So what I say is, before you start talking sex to your children, you need to be comfortable talking sex to each other. So husband and wife, you need to have a chat about where your values come from, and it's a fun conversation. I mean, I talk to parents, husband, wife who've been married for like 15 years, and they've never talked to each other about, where their values and what they think about sex, and have you heard of this word or that word. So have that fun conversation. Find out where each other got their information, and is this the right information? Is it misinformation? So as a couple, find out where you stand. And you know what? Even that conversation will make you more comfortable. So it will help you feel less embarrassed because you're practicing in this safe place with husband and wife. And it's fun. Every one of your listeners, husbands, wife, you will enjoy that conversation of talking sex with each other. Once you've done that, recognize that, you may not have the knowledge you need. You may not feel that you have the skills. That's okay. If it's knowledge, I mean, read a book, find a book. Now, our books are listed on my website. But look, wherever you go in the world, I am sure that there will be good books. But just make sure, the word being good in the sense that they are actually not giving false information. There are a lot of books out there, especially for younger children, that are more about indoctrination in various, gender issues and, almost saying that pornography is okay or masturbation is good for you. So you read the book first and find out that those myths and misinformation, like I mentioned, are not in it. But there are lots of good books. So inform yourself. Read material that is true and healthy and wise, whatever religion, background, language you may be in. So inform yourself and don't be afraid to talk to other parents, because cooperative action is necessary. Because, talk to the parents of your children's friends and find out, do you know any good books? What are you doing? How are you introducing the topic? Well, let's talk about it. In certain schools and churches I speak in, after I have spoken, they formed groups where, like, parents of preschoolers, parents of what we call primary school, that is anything from 6 years to 10 or 11 years. So parents of high schoolers, which is like teenage kids. And so they'll form small groups and they start discussing, how do we talk to children about this issue or porn or masturbation? How do we talk to our kids? What are you doing? How are you doing it right? All right, you found this book. That's really good. Well, let me get a copy. Let's have a discussion about how we can use it. So, firstly, get comfortable about it. Second, get the information, share it with other parents, and then, just do it. So how do we just do it? People do it in various ways. Some parents like to actually have this particular time when they talk to a child. So like sometimes it's like the mother and the daughter and the father and the son. Some parents like to even have a time away with a child when they introduce, now, if you have 3 kids, there'll be this ritual where as each child reaches 10 years, mom and daughter go away for half a day, or they have this special time. So then the next child's going when's my time coming to talk about it? So some parents have this sort of special time when they start the conversation. So that's the important thing. Start the conversation. But then it must be an ongoing thing. You can't just do a one-off and forget about it. That's one method. But what I recommend, which many of us recommend, is start early. And I mean by 3, 4, 5 in an age-appropriate manner. Like in the really little ones, all you need is the right words of the body parts, of the genitals. And if you start there, and then, talk about the goodness and, boy, girl, what's so special. Work in an age-appropriate manner, but do what we call drip feeding. In other words, keep giving little bits of information all along the way. And so what do? You don't have to necessarily, okay, today we are going to talk about the penis. No, that's not the way. It's not necessary. What you do is you look for what we call teachable moments. You look for things that are out there. Maybe something on television that comes up. Maybe something, you ask them, what are you watching? You're watching YouTube. What are you watching? Oh, let's watch it together. You're walking through a shopping center and you walk past, a group, a window display of lingerie or something, and you see your little boy sort of turning and getting all sort of bright-eyed and looking at it. And you ask, why do you think that's attractive, darling? Yeah, and talk about nudity and, why it's attractive. So use what we call teachable moments. Look, it may be even a neighbor who's pregnant or something, or an auntie who's pregnant, and then you say, do you know what's happening, darling? Let's talk about babies and how they get in there. So look for those teachable moments all the time, and just keep drip feeding in an age-appropriate manner. And always remember, never too early and never too late. Just start wherever you are.
Yeah, awesome. And also, I love that this conversation with your spouse, like this is something you can do. Like I think some people also that I'm in touch with, they're interested in this, but they have babies, right? Their kids are super young, don't even talk yet. But this conversation with your spouse, that's where you can start, already having these conversations and practicing and looking over, like, oh, what are some little changes we can make, like referring to the genitals with their proper names or things like that. Yeah. Yeah, and ongoing conversations. I think that's like the new twist, like from my generation to this upcoming generation. It's the new way that we're learning, that it's really meant to be continuous. Yeah.
Yeah, and also you can, with the older child, you can give them books that are appropriate for them to read. Now, in Australia, our books, we have one book called Growing Up by the Book, which is about the body, about puberty and body development. And we tell parents, give the book and you ask the child to read a chapter, you read it, and then you can talk about it. So you see, that reduces that embarrassment level a bit, because, you can say it's like a book club, family book club. You read it, I read it. Oh, what did you think about that? What did you think about what they say, what she says about this topic or that topic? And the same with teenagers, you can give it and then say, oh, did you read that? No, let's read chapter 3. Okay, what does she say about pornography and why it's bad for you? Let's talk about that. So, and so you can use then that as a little starter to say, has anyone in school shown you any pictures like this or any videos, and what do you think about them? And then teach them, well, if it happens next time, just say this is not healthy and I don't like it, and just come and talk to me and go away. So you can use it. It's like introducing a topic and giving them the skills to deal with it when it happens. So you can use it in many ways.
Yeah, that's what I love about having these conversations and why it's so important is we're giving them skills to, while we have these discussions, we can talk about these ways to cope with these situations.
Yeah.
And yeah, like books, I just want to mention again, that's a really great way to make these teachable moments, especially when you get a specific book. Because kids usually love books, especially when they can't read yet themselves. Then you can just get a great little kids book about where do babies come from or something like that. And make it your own family conversation.
And the thing is, Amelia, also the fact that when you talk about, I'm not comfortable, okay, you get comfortable, you talk about it, I don't know what to say, and then what am I going to talk about? It's like, okay, right, you told me I have to talk about sex, but that's a big topic. What am I supposed? And I always say, there are some hot topics that you have to talk about. Again, very age appropriate. But I guess we talked about it before off camera, and like pornography. You got to start talking about pornography in an age-appropriate manner. Here in Australia, we say before you send them to school. So if your kid is like 5 years old and you're sending them off to school, which is where they would start school here in Australia, you have to have told them that if somebody shows you some pictures or video of people without clothes or doing something, then, and it makes you, like I said before, feel kind of wriggly and wiggly because kids are curious. You must say, this is not good. Run away, don't stay, because then you feel like watching. Say no, run away and talk to me or your teachers. Just give them some skill. Early. even before they go to school. Because otherwise, if somebody shows it and you haven't talked about it, it's very frightening for a child to see something like that. And they then feel that it's my fault that I saw this. If you haven't established that, come to me and talk to me, comfort. And so, that's one area I say you have to talk. And the other area, again, what we talked about is the whole area of self-touch and masturbation. We can't avoid talking about those hot topics. And yet, probably the moment I mention the word, there are people, your listeners, who are already feeling embarrassed to have even heard the word. But we can't avoid talking about those. We have to be aware that our children are, likely to find that their genitals feel good. And so again, I go back to what I said. Genitals are good, but they are not a toy. And you can talk that with even littlies. But as they get older, the thing to talk about is that, again, genitals feel good, but they are made for a purpose. And when you touch your genitals to masturbate, you don't even have to use the word, when you touch your genitals for pleasure, it feels good. But unfortunately, that kind of solo sex can become very habit forming, because it wires your brain that this is pleasure, this feels good, and it becomes habit forming. And it becomes a kind of what we would call almost a selfish act. It's like, I will pleasure myself. And look, sex is not made for that. Sex is a couple activity. So when you only get used to pleasuring yourself, and sadly, if you tie that in with thinking, what we would call lustful or sexual thoughts, worse, if you masturbate watching pornography, then your body thinks that's the way to find pleasure. And with time, you may not even be able to find pleasure in couple sex if you got used to pleasuring yourself and only watching porn and, pleasuring yourself and masturbating. And these are things you can talk to teenagers about. And again, get a book that talks about the goodness of the body, the goodness of sex, and how masturbation, solo sex, isn't the healthiest thing to do. But I always say, look, be careful not to let children get guilty about it. Just because I've touched myself, oh gosh, I'm all guilty and I'm a terrible person. That's not good too. Because, we live in a very sexualized society. And a kid might feel stimulated. Teenage brains are lighting up with sex. And there's sex all around them. They might touch themselves and, pleasure themselves. But don't let them feel guilty. But just tell them, it's not a good habit. Because it can become, it can wire your brain to accept that this is a good thing. But don't get guilty if you've done it.
Yeah, so much good stuff that you just said. And I like this rule of thumb that you have in Australia. Before the kids go to school, they should know about pornography, especially with the presence of phones. Even young kids get phones these days. So, yeah, you don't know how their parents are controlling those phones, and it's unfortunately, it is a risk as soon as they have any kind of contact with screens or internet. So, yeah, I've learned to have this conversation myself with my kids this year, and yeah, I mean, I think we have so many concepts as a parent, and you kind of mentioned this, just this embarrassment, but our kids, they don't have it yet. And so if we just talk about it like a normal thing, look, this is something not so good, so we need to watch out for it. Just let me know if you see it. And I read to them this book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
It's a great book, yeah.
It's a great book, great explanation of just what's happening to the brain. Like you said, this rewiring of the brain when you see pornography. And yeah, my kids were very interested, except for the 4-year-old. He just got a bit bored, but that's why they have a version for younger kids. Yeah, it was a really good conversation. not negative in any way. And it was great because they have these action steps, can do, and a way to remember what to do when if you see pornography. And so, yeah, the kids, they take that really just naturally, and it doesn't have to be like a heavy thing. But yeah, like you said, I think it's so important to have first this conversation about how good sex is, you know, not that we start it with this sort of not so good conversation, like, so look, there's porn and you need to watch out. But you have first this good conversation, and then at some point the explanation about porn or something else. But you can always refer to the good conversation and be like, look, God meant for it to be like this, but unfortunately we have to watch out for these things in this world today. Yeah.
Like, that, and thank you for reiterating it and emphasizing it, that start with a good story and don't make it like there's only rules. Don't make it what we would call legalistic, do this, don't do that. But rather make it, this is a beautiful thing. But, like you said, we all mess up beautiful things. And therefore but thing still is beautiful. Even if we mess up, we can come back and we can rebuild this beauty. That's why our brains, we call it neuroplasticity. Our brains are plastic. Even when we wire it wrong, it can be rewired to be this beautiful, accept this beautiful thing. And another thing I would encourage parents, and this is not easy, try to stay a step ahead of your children, because they love to show you how much they know. So it's kind of good to try and keep a step ahead. So how do you do that? One thing is to actually ask your children. Ask them, what are the latest apps out there? Oh, there's a thing called Switch, is it? Can you tell me about that? Or, Instagram? Yeah, I've heard about Instagram, but tell me what makes Instagram so attractive. So show a natural curiosity, and they love showing off. So then you can investigate, okay, so this is what they're watching. Well, let me go to a good website somewhere and find out some more information. So try to keep a step ahead. Ask them, like, is anyone, your classmates talking about pornography or gender issues? And if they say, yeah, and mention something, that's interesting, tell me more. Tell me more. Find them. Then after you finish the conversation, you can go and research it more. So try and keep a step ahead. And again, try to do it as a couple. If you're married, as a husband-wife living together, try and make it a couple thing as you guide your children. That's a lot of challenges. Keep informed. Try to keep a step ahead of your kids. Don't be frightened of this so-called cyber world. I mean, for all your listeners, for goodness sake, I'm 77. If I can read and find out information on social media, every one of you can do it. It's not an impossible task. But if you have children, grandchildren, you have to do it, because that is their world, the cyber world. And we can't say that that is not something we can know about or find out about. But that's where they're finding pornography. That's where they're finding information. And sadly, that's where they are being bullied. The whole cyber bullying, and, it's all out there. And so we need to know that it's happening. And one of the things I tell parents is like, and this may not necessarily related to sex, but your child. If you notice that your child is getting moody or looking different, or maybe spending a lot of time in their room with their either internet or, phone, get curious. Find out what's happening. Don't be afraid to go to school and talk to the teachers. Find out from the teachers how the child's faring in school. Find out if there's any bullying going on. You are a parent. I tell parents, take back the authority of parenting. You can't hand it to the school. You are the parent. So you have a right to be, again, the word proactive about it, and go to schools, check up, watch your child. Very important.
Yeah. Let's do it, parents. Let's be our number one interrogator or bodyguard about our kid. Yeah.
And I'm glad you used that word, because we are the bodyguards. We are the protectors. And, whatever religion you come from, we've created the child in our body. If you're a mother, you carried that baby. You are protective. Continue. It's okay to be that kind of bulldog protecting your child, because that's what role you have been given. And so to tell your child, I am your mother. This is my job, to look after you. You may not like it, but this is my job. So let's sit down and talk about it. Oh, Mom, I don't want to know. That's okay. Let's talk about it anyway. And one more thing which we missed along the way. It's okay for your children to see Mom and Dad being intimate. It's okay for them to see you hugging or kissing, and at that moment they will go, ew. Here in Australia, the kids would say, oh, Mom, Dad, go find a room. That's a famous saying here. What are you doing kissing in the kitchen or something? But that's good, because later on they will remember that Mom and Dad were intimate and loved each other. And that's really important too.
Yeah, that's something I'm also realizing, that there's so much media, books and films alike, that portray a certain style of romance, which is generally not very healthy. It's usually quite selfish motives of love. And so I realized I really need to up my game in my own marriage to be a good example for my kids, to really try to show them, what's healthy romance. It's not easy. We are trying to, raise a family.
We mess up too, and that's okay. And it's okay to say, Mom and Dad were having an argument. This is because even when you love each other, there are times when, you can get annoyed with each other. But then you make up, and that's what love is. Teaching them that love is not me and finding my gratification, but true love is about caring for the other. And that's important to teach our children. Because like you said, it's so easy in our culture today to say, I am what matters, my desires are what matters. But not to look at the partner, whether even if you're dating, or even a friend, to think it's not about grabbing the toy, but about sharing and maybe giving my toy to my friend. That is real love. So even from a very young age, even not about sex, talking about toys and playing, you start teaching your children about other-focused caring. And that is what true intimacy is. You can build on it. So everything is about building blocks. And you don't have to start with sex. When you start building friendship and intimacy, then you can build that up into what is good sexual relationship. And then you talk to your teenager about dating, and then you talk later about marriage. And so it's age appropriate. Talking about when to start, I talked to one couple, and the couple, mind you, they are only in their 20s, and the girl was saying the first time her mother talked to her about sex was on the night before she got married. Ooh. That's a little too late. But you need to start early.
Yeah. And also about starting early. I don't know, maybe some parents feel like this, but so if we start early and maybe our child just really takes on the message and it's fine, but what about this, just worry of what do other parents think? Or I think I've heard also parents say like, so my child asked this question, But I wanted to tell them during this vacation time so they don't run off to school and tell everyone about it.
But it is okay because you teach your child about the body and body parts. And I can tell you so many stories about mothers whom I've told this. And then they say, the child came out right in front of like grandma and grandpa who were visiting and like announced all the body parts. And
Wow.
so it's you teach, but you teach it together with what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. So these are special parts. That's why we call them, we call them the swimsuit parts. You cover them with your swimsuit. Why? I mean, you don't cover your face, you don't cover your arms, but you cover your genitals. And you may, if you get a little older, you cover the breasts if you're a girl. That's why we wear the swimsuit parts. And so you don't, just like there are special parts, there are times and places when we show them or we touch them, but we also talk about them. So, they are special, but you don't necessarily have to run across the playground shouting it out. That's not the right place. But look, if somebody asks you, then you can answer, even if it's one of your friends. If one of your friends calls the penis I don't know what you would call it in a kind of a cutesy term, a pencil or something, you can say, no, actually the right word for it is this. And that's not wrong. Because nobody can pull you up, even to say like another parent, oh, your son told my son that he has a penis. Like, so he has one, right? What's the big deal? I mean, why would you call it a pencil or anything else? Just call it by the right name. So don't be afraid to face that. That's a fact. It's not a myth. It's not a falsehood. It's not a lie. It's a fact. So facts accompanied by appropriate behavior. And that's not just in sex. It's in anything. Teaching your child that there's a time and a place where you share things. Like when it comes to the genitals, in the bath with mommy or daddy, or with the doctor with mommy or daddy. That's when your genitals are shown and, the doctor might touch, but with mommy and daddy there. Appropriate. Similarly, if you're talking about it, you talk at home, we talk about it. But when you go to school, unless somebody talks to you and asks you something, you don't necessarily have to talk about these. Although it's fun, but you don't have to talk about it. So that balance is something you can teach. But don't let that stop you from talking about it, because it is really important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what I really hope for parents to get from this podcast episode is that we can let go of a lot of these fears that we have, that have just built up over many generations. And it's okay to let go of them now. And also just to realize the importance of this, our role in this, that we're really important to our kids. Yeah, especially with sexualized society today. And so I just hope, that this will give those parents, just this realization of how important this is. And that it's doable even at a young age. And like you said, a drip conversation, drip by drip. But there's also one more myth that I want to ask you, because it's also quite common that parents say, okay, I'll wait till my child comes to me with the questions.
You'll be waiting forever, Amelia. I often say that if I didn't talk to my son when he was 4 or 5, he's 49 now, and I'll probably be still waiting. So the point is, if you don't start that early, if you're going to wait, a couple of things. One is they will get it somewhere. And the second thing is that somewhere is probably going to give them the wrong information, and then you are going to have to redo, in other words, sort of work on the wrong and then reteach them the right thing. And so that is the problem. If you say it first, if you get in first, you give them the right information, you give them the information that then allows them to filter what they're hearing. If they go out and learn it from somewhere else, then you are going to first have to work through all those lies and then replace them with the truth. So there is many reasons why waiting doesn't work, especially in today's cyber world, because a lot of the information out there is just plain misinformation, plain lies basically about sex and sexuality and gender and being a boy and being a girl. Get in there with whatever your culture, whatever your religion, get in there with the truth. Early, often drip feed, but parents, just do it, okay? Because you are the ones who have to do it.
Yeah, let's do it. And like you said, together, like that's also what I want to work on is build up parent groups or just the openness together as parents where we can share our experiences, share our fears, but also our experience and resources and lift each other up, give each other a bit of courage in this new conversation. Yeah. Do you also know what to do? 'Cause some children don't want to listen. So maybe if parents did finally get up the courage and then their children don't listen. And I want to ask about two kinds of not listening. Like one, just because of lack of interest. Like I mentioned, my 4-year-old, it's just a lack of interest. And honestly, I would say it's fine. I don't want to push the information into his head. But what if it's not really a lack of interest, but just already a lack, discomfort already, just, not wanting to.
Yeah. Thank you for breaking that up, because the lack of information, if it's a 4-year-old or a 4-year-old, I mean, like, they don't want to really hear about sex. But then you just teach them about body parts. You just teach them, and then you wait for an opportune moment to start the next step. Like, say, there's an auntie who's pregnant. Or then you say, hey, do you know how babies get into, your auntie's belly, stomach, and then they go, yeah, how did they get in? So look for those moments with a child who's too young to be interested. But that lack of interest could actually go into adult life, sort of teens or pre-teens, which is where it goes to about they don't want to really listen. And you know why? One of the reasons is that they don't value the parent and the parent as an information source. So that's where you need to establish early that you as a parent actually are an information source, not just only in sex, but that you are the source of information. Because otherwise it's like, what do you know? You may be 35 years old or even 30 years old as a parent, but to the child who's 12, you are ancient. You are like the dinosaur because they think they know everything at that age. So you need to establish your authority as a parent and as a source of knowledge early. And that's important. And so if they're still not interested, go back to the drip feeding, drop ideas. Wait for an opportunity when you are doing something. I often say wait for an opportunity when you have them captive. Like you're in the car together and you're driving somewhere. Great opportunity. Because they may not want to listen, but they've got to listen if they want you to drive them to soccer or wherever music practice. So use some of those captive moments to start the conversation and then just leave it. But keep coming back to it. They may show you that they are so cool and they know everything. But hey, they actually are interested and they are listening and they're going, oh, Mom, I don't want to listen. And you go, oh, that's okay. Well, let's just put the radio or the MP3 or whatever. Let's just switch it off and let's just talk about sex. Oh, Mom, I don't want to. Never mind. We've got 20 minutes more till we get to soccer practice. So let's just talk about this while we go along. Treat it almost in a light manner, but they will listen even when you think they're not listening. And that's important with an older child. Because let's face it, parents aren't cool. They're like boring and, so yesterday and such a dinosaur. So just be uncool and talk about it. And also ask them. So don't just keep spouting. Just stop and ask, what do you think about it? Or has anyone talked about this in school? They may go, no. And that's okay. But you started it and you've shown them that you're willing to listen to their opinion. So that's important too. Tell them, but also ask and listen when they say something. They say something, don't freak. Don't go, oh, what are you talking about? So, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that. Let's talk about that more.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think kids they have a natural curiosity and they are listening. So yeah, it's still good to keep up the conversation and one drip and then another drip. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Patricia. I feel like you have answered all of my questions. I'm sure other parents maybe have even more, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with all of us. Yeah, it's so wonderful to have someone who has studied in this area, but also brings in their life of faith into this whole sexuality realm. So yeah, I don't know, are there other people like you that even exist?
I'm sure there are all over the world, but we have a couple here in people who actually studied with me when I did the course, because I'm like, I'm 77. Will you all young ones please step in? And maybe Amelia, that's your role for the future. For the whole of Europe, you could be the sex educator par excellence. So, there's a room for, lots of people to step in here. And this channel that you've got is a great idea. Because the more we can do to empower parents, the better it is. Because let's face it, the future of our world is in the hands of our children. And if we are going to bring up citizens of the world, whether it be sexuality or gender or anything else, we need to nurture them in early and speak to them often. It's really important.
Yeah. And I also want to say it deepens our relationship. It's really actually a great thing, maybe uncomfortable in the beginning, but it really does make your relationship so much deeper. I mean, if you ignore it, it's like you're ignoring a third of, I don't know, words you can say in this world. It's like,
Yeah.
It's like a black hole that
Yeah.
you have in your relationship even. And when you talk about it, there's so much more. And yeah, it's really great. I recommend it to all parents. Yeah, thank you so much, Patricia. And once again, please check her out, everyone, at patriciaweerakoon.com. And yeah, hope to have you on again sometime.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me, Amelia.
Play it, pause it, post it, click it, and share it.